Contemporary romanticism starts from the inverse principle. Now it is others who desire intensely, and the hero, oneself, has little or any desire at all. Roquentin desires less than the citizens of Bouville, and what he does desire, he desires less intensely. He desires less than Annie. He's the only character in Nausea who knows that adventures do not exist. In other words, that exotic desire, metaphysical desire, always ends in disappointment. Similarly, Meursault has only natural and spontaneous desires, in other words, limited, finite, and without any future. He too refuses adventure in the shape of a journey to Paris. He knows perfectly well that faraway places are transfigured by metaphysical desire. The early romantic wanted to prove his spontaneity, his divinity, by desiring more intensely than others. The latter-day romantic tries to prove exactly the same thing by totally opposite means. This complete reversal is necessitated by the closing in of the mediator and the constant progress of metaphysical truth. Nobody today believes in noble, spontaneous desires. Even the most naive recognize the mediator's shadow behind the frantic passion of early romanticism. Thus we enter what Madame Nathalie Sarraute, quoting Stendhal, calls, quote, the era of suspicion, end of quote. The violence of desire is no longer a criterion of spontaneity. The lucidity of our time is able to recognize the presence of the sacred in desires that would appear to be most natural. Contemporary reflection discovers myths and mythology in every one of our desires. The 18th century demystified religion, the 19th century demystified history and philology. Our era demystifies daily life. Not a single desire escapes the demystifier who is patiently occupied in constructing on top of all the dead myths the greatest myth of all, that of his own detachment. He alone, it seems, never desires. In short, it is a question of convincing others, and especially of convincing oneself, that one is completely and divinely autonomous. Thus, once more, we have seen that lucidity and blindness increase side by side. Henceforth, the truth is so brilliantly clear that it has to be taken into account, if only in order to escape it. This frightful truth forces the subject into ever more delirious lies. The early romantics disguised their desire, but they never denied its existence. Ascesis, for the sake of desire, raged only in the public parks, in the salon, and in the bedroom. Now it triumphs, even in the secret recesses of one's conscience, and in the interior monologue. The hero who experiences the greatest desire is succeeded by the hero who experiences the least desire. But the Manichaean division between self and other has not disappeared. It secretly controls the metamorphoses of the romantic hero. The exception is always opposed to the norm, as good as opposed to evil. Meursault alone is innocent in a sea of guilt. He dies the victim of the others, as Vinnie's Chatterton died. He is the judge of his judges, like all the romantics before him. The hero always escapes the curse which his creator hurls at the rest of mankind. There is always someone who comes out on top of the romantic game unscathed, and that someone has to be I, the author, before it is I, the reader. It is the truth about contemporary neo-romanticism which Camus reveals under the veil of a transparent allegory in that admirable and liberating work, The Fall. Transcending the romanticism of the stranger and the plague, the writer denounces the twin attempts of self-justification in the literature of involvement and the literature of non-involvement. Like Dostoevsky's Notes from the Underground, this work does not achieve reconciliation. Like Notes from the Underground, it has already gone beyond romanticism. Albert Camus died at the moment when a whole new career was probably opening up before him. Whereas romantic readers used to identify with the hero who felt the strongest desire, today they identify with the hero who feels least desire. They are always docile in their identification with heroes who provide with models their passion for autonomy. Don Quixote, driven by the same passion, identified with Amadis of Gaul. The mythology that nourishes contemporary fiction corresponds to a new stage of metaphysical desire. We think we are anti-romantic because we loudly repudiate previous romanticisms. Let me repeat that because the shouting outside interrupted my thought. Whereas romantic readers used to identify with the hero who felt the strongest desire, today they identify with the hero who feels the least desire. They are always docile in their identification with heroes who provide with models their passion for autonomy. Don Quixote, driven by the same passion, identified with Amadis of Gaul. The mythology that nourishes contemporary fiction corresponds to a new stage of metaphysical desire. Again, the mythology that nourishes contemporary fiction corresponds to a new stage of metaphysical desire. We think we are anti-romantic because we loudly repudiate previous romanticisms. We are like Don Quixote's friends, who are busy trying to cure the poor man of his madness, because they themselves are the victims of it in an aggravated form. As soon as the subject who desires recognizes the role of imitation in his own desire, he has to renounce either this desire or his pride. Modern lucidity has shifted the problem of ascesis and broadened it. It is no longer a question of renouncing the object temporarily in order the better to possess it, but of renouncing the desire itself. The choice is between pride and desire, since desire makes slaves of us. Non-desire once more becomes a privilege, as it was for the wise man of old or the Christian saint. But the desiring subject recoils in terror before the idea of absolute renunciation. He looks for loopholes. He wants to create a personality in which the absence of desire has not been won with difficulty out of the anarchy of instincts and metaphysical passion. The somnambulist hero of American writers is the solution to this problem. Non-desire in this hero has nothing to do with the triumph of the mind over evil forces, nor with the self-discipline extolled by the great religions and higher humanisms. It makes one think rather of a numbing of the senses, of a total or partial loss of vital curiosity. Sounds like millennials. Not in an insulting way, in kind of like a complimentary way. In the case of Meursault, this privileged state is merged with the pure individual essence. In Roquentin's case, it is a sudden gift of grace which, without any apparent reason, descends on the hero in the form of nausea. In many other works, the metaphysical structure is less apparent. It has to be disengaged from the fiction which at once expresses and conceals it. Alcohol, narcotics, extreme physical pain, erotic abuses can destroy or deaden desire. In the end, the hero reaches a stage of lucid stupefaction, which constitutes the final romantic pose. This non-desire, of course, has nothing in common with abstinence and sobriety. This non-desire, of course, has nothing in common with abstinence and sobriety. But the hero claims that in his indifference he accomplishes by caprice and almost without being aware of it what others accomplish by desire. This somnambulist hero lives on bad faith. He tries to resolve the conflict between pride and desire without ever clearly formulating it. Perhaps a more radical pride is needed to present the problem frankly. At the time of writing The Evening with M. Test, Paul Valéry was a man with that sort of pride. Valéryism contrasts the vaniteux, who desires through the other and for the other, with the proud man who no longer desires anything but his own nothingness. Let me repeat that. Valéryism contrasts the vaniteux who desires through the other and for the other with the proud man who no longer desires anything but his own nothingness. The only individualist worthy of the name, the proud man, is no longer looking for escape from his nothingness and desire. Rather, after a radical mental ascesis, he makes that nothingness the very object of his adoration. His aim is still divine autonomy, but the direction of his effort is reversed. To found the whole of existence on that nothingness which one carries inside himself. To found the whole of existence on that nothingness which one carries inside himself is to transform impotence into omnipotence. To inflate the inner desert island of Robinson Crusoe to the dimensions of infinity. Quote, "Remove everything that I may see," end of quote, exclaims M. Test in his logbook. At the extreme limit of interior destitution, pride must finally arrive at the point where it sees itself in the original light of a pure self. The passage from vanity to pride is a passage from the comparable to the incomparable, from division to unity, from masochistic anguish to, quote, sovereign disdain, end of quote.